What's up, guys? Today we're going to go over a new addition to our Dakota series, the 20-foot wide Dakota house. We're really excited to get this addition into the series, and we want to make sure that everybody has a clear-cut view and a clear-cut understanding of how the installation process is going to go through. All right, guys, so what we want to do, we want to start, once we've made sure all of our product is there and that we're ready to start building the greenhouse, we have an understanding of the instructions. So what we're going to start with today is installing the ground stakes. The first step that you're going to go through is squaring your greenhouse. Now, if you're building in the middle of a field, you can just pick your width of your series. You know, this one being the 20-foot Dakota, we're going to go 20 foot wide on the ground stakes. What we're going to do today is, since we're amidst all the demo houses and our nice garden spot out here at the facility, what we're going to start with is squaring off of one of our existing greenhouses. So we're going to pull, it looks like about 6 feet from our greenhouse, and that's going to get our first 2 ground stakes set, which is going to simplify our squaring process just a little bit. All right, guys, so as we mentioned, we are going to go ahead and square off of one of our existing greenhouses. So John here's chosen 5 feet, gives us a nice gap to walk between the greenhouses, lets the roll-up sides operate, and gives everything, room to move around here. With the ground stakes being this short, John's going to go ahead and use the stake driver that we include in your kit and a 4-pound sledgehammer, as opposed to using a T-post driver or an automated driver. Okay, so what we just saw there is John getting the ground stakes started in the ground. We had Keith here helping him with the level in his hand. You can do this by yourself. You just have to stop in between a couple of strokes of the hammer. Keith was able to check our plumb, so we checked the back and forth from the inside and the outside of the greenhouse at the same time as we were checking the left to right towards the middle of the greenhouse bow. Guys, if you'll notice here on this ground stake, for the Dakota series, we do only want 6 inches above the soil here. We are building what we're going to say is lay of the land on this one. Instead of leveling out this place perfectly, we got a bit of a slope downhill. So John's gone ahead and left us some height on this ground stake. When we get down to the other end, we're not going to be worried so much about level as we are going to be worried about the even height across the lay of the land. We have a 30-inch ground stake. Now we want this in the ground roughly 18 inches. If you hit or miss by an inch or two, you're going to be okay. If you go a little deep or you're not quite there, if you're 15 inches, you're going to be fine. Don't stress that. We do want this in the ground as close to 18 inches as we can get. John's got us in the ground right now about 12 inches. So what that has done is left us about 18 above the ground here, almost 1.5 feet. The reason for leaving this ground stake high is that we're working against the lay of the land here. We're not working on a perfectly level patch. So we are going to end up driving this ground stake down a little bit further, but we wanted to leave the excess here so that we can set our corners high, and that way as we get our string down through here and we want to make sure all of our ground stakes hit the same level, some may end up being about 6 inches. That's going to be our minimum that we target. Some may be around 8 inches. The point in leaving the ground stake high is so that we aren't too deep to make any necessary adjustments, so that we get the filler ground stakes in between the 2 end bows at the right height. Just grab that red one for right now, because we're not worried about that length at the moment. Yeah, because we're going to have to pull that 5 foot off of here. $5 foot. You just off the board, right? Are you off the board?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna be doing a little adjusting. All right, guys, so now we've got that first ground stake in the ground. Again, we are measuring off of our existing greenhouse here. So what we've done is, with the width of the house being at 20 feet, we want that measurement to be outside to outside of your end wall ground stakes. So we've gone ahead and we pulled 5 feet. I'm gonna center my ground stake on that 5 foot mark on the tape, just as John did down there. We're gonna take that 20 foot mark and we're gonna move in just a little bit here so that the 20 foot mark is on the outside of the ground stake, not between the two. Guys, that's our first 2 ground stakes in the ground for this house. Now again, getting these square with the aesthetics or the look of things that are around us, that was our biggest concern here. This gets to be the fun part, where you're gonna find your 3rd and your 4th corner here. It's where our diagonal measurement comes into play. There's a square root calculator online, foundation calculator. Also attached to your instruction booklet should be a foundation squaring measurement pre-laid out for your particular size kit. So with a 20 by 24 is what we're building today, with 31 feet, 2 inches, and 63/64. So we're gonna call that 31 feet and 3 inches, because 1/64 is not gonna throw off our greenhouse. What we're gonna do now is we will make sure that we have our width at 20 feet outside to outside. We're gonna pull our 24-foot length down the house, and then we're gonna pull that 31 feet and 3 inches diagonally from what I'm gonna call our second ground stake driven here to what will be our third corner diagonally across the house. Once we've gotten that in place, all of your measurements again are going to be outside to outside. So 24 feet in length from your first corner to your third corner is gonna be outside to outside that measurement, not between the pipe. We don't wanna center on those. We'll get to that later. Now guys, I know this looks like a lot. We've got 3 measuring tapes on the ground. We've got 4 or 5 bodies moving around here. A lot of this is being done just for the sake of time. We're trying to get this done in our 8-hour work day today. We've gone ahead and double checked our 20 foot. We drove our stakes the right way. Nothing bounced around too much on us. And now we've pulled our diagonal measurement here at 31 feet and 3 inches. So what we want to make sure is at 31 feet and 3 inches, we find our 24-foot mark. So if I look here on the tape, I'm 31 feet and 3 inches. We're gonna move outward until these 2 tapes cross at our 2 measurements. So now we're at 24 feet on the length of the house, and we're at 31 feet and 3 inches for our diagonal measurement. Now, we can get real finicky if we want to be particular. Just know that if you do it this close right here, your house is gonna look absolutely perfect when you're built. So what we're gonna do now is that I've got my cross here. I'm gonna want John to put the ground stake right at the edge of my fingertip there. And that should put us right in square for our third ground stake. All right, so here we are, guys. We're at our fourth and final corner to square up the greenhouse. We got one guy holding the end of the tape there at 24 feet pre-set up here. We know our width here is gonna be at 20 feet, and our diagonal measurement is gonna be the same at 31 feet and 3 inches. So guys, you know, just as before on our third ground stake, what we tried to do was line these measurements up. You got 31 feet, 3 inches, 24 feet. Here's the other problem that we have now. We have a third measuring tape that we have to make sure our 20-foot width is in here. So we can see that we need to move these tapes around just a little bit and get within this range. Now, if you'll notice, if I came all the way out here to the outside, my diagonal measurement is gonna be about 1 3/4 inches, 2 inches too long. We'll call that 1 3/4 inches too long. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go ahead and let this ground stake settle right in here between these 2 tapes. That's gonna give me the outside measurement of 20 feet for sure. That's gonna get me right at the 24-foot mark. And that once we drive the ground stake in, we're gonna be right here on the 31.3. So if your tapes don't line up just absolutely perfectly, again, once you build the entire house, it will look absolutely square. The aesthetics of it will not be off at all, as long as we let this ground stake fall right in this gap right here. That's gonna put us right on that 31.3, and that's gonna put us right on our diagonal measurements. Keeping in mind, we're dealing with the width of the tape, both directions. And by the time we drive that in there, if we're doing all of our measurements off the inside, we're gonna be right where we need to be. In all of our measurements up to this point, we've been outside to outside. So our 20-foot width, we're measuring outside the ground stake. The 24-foot length, we're measuring outside the ground stake. Now that we have our 4 corners set, we want to put these marks on center. So I'm gonna have John come over here. Every 4-foot mark on your measuring tape, we're gonna put just a mark on the ground right here. We got black on this limestone. Gravel works pretty good. If you're working in a field, maybe a fluorescent paint or something a little brighter to catch your eye. We're gonna go 4 foot, we're gonna go to the 8-foot mark, 12 foot, and so on down the house. We'll put these marks centered on the measurement, and that's what's gonna keep all of our measurements on the interior of the house on that 4-foot marking there. Now that John's come through and he's made a mark every 4 feet, it's really easy to see on the ground where your next ground stakes need to go. So by doing this step right here, you take a little time to lay your measuring tape out, you take a little bit of time to put these marks on the ground, What we're gonna do in the next step is we're gonna put a string around these ground stakes. That's gonna help us know right where to make that ground stake kiss that line, and that's gonna keep all of our ground stakes right in line. Having the mark on the ground keeps you from having to pull that measuring tape every time, trip over a measuring tape. That way you know as you go down through here, 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20 on this 24-foot long house, we're gonna have a ground stake in each of those locations. All right, guys. So as I mentioned before, we've left these ground stakes a little tall. We've done this intentionally. We wanted to make sure that we could build this house lay of the land, that everything was gonna work out the way we wanted it to. If you'll notice on your stake driver that we give you with your kit, it is a milled piece of steel that slides down into your ground stake. With this stake driver, there is the possibility, as you can see, we're not dealing with it too bad right here today. There's a possibility it will make your ground stake mushroom, as we like to say it, or spread. It's gonna make it bevel at the top. Now we're dealing with some decent soil around here, so these are going in pretty well. We're not really beating the tops of them too bad. But what I would do here is, since we're gonna build lay of the land, each of these corner ground stakes is gonna get marked individually. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this at 8 inches so that we know where to set our string. Now as I go through and I mark this right here at 8 inches, mark this ground stake at 8 inches. We'll mark all 4 corners the same way. When we draw our string, we're gonna draw it on that mark. That way, if the ground goes up or down in between, it does not matter. We'll be at 6 inches on that corner, 6 inches on that corner, the third and the fourth as well. The purpose of doing this is if one of your ground stakes throughout the middle of your house needs to be a little bit shorter, as we talked about before, that's gonna be cut level with the top of the line once everything's driven down. All right, guys, so we drove this down to that 8-inch mark that we discussed. As you can see, a little bit more driving, got into a little bit tougher soil. We've curled the top of that like we discussed a moment ago. These ground stakes only need to be at 6 inches. So the point of making that 8 inches is that now I can come up from the ground level and make my 6-inch mark to where when we want to run this string around the house, now I can tie this off at 6 inches on this ground stake. We've got our 4 corners set in here. We've got our 4-foot markings down here for our next ground stakes. And we've gone ahead and we've hung our string line. We've got that hung at the 6-inch mark on all of our corners. If you look down through, I don't know how well you can see the string or not, but there are already gonna be a few places that are gonna be about 4 inches. I can just see them right now. As long as we get all the ground stakes cut at the same level and our corners are at those 6 inches, we're gonna be good with the lay of the land here. All right, everybody, so now we've gotten through the technical part of the ground stakes. The rest just gets down to labor here. We know with this particular greenhouse, we are going with the lay of the land, so we want it to fall evenly across. Not all of these middle ground stakes are gonna be the same height as we already discussed when we were hanging the line up. We know that some of them are gonna be a little bit shorter. So what we wanna do though, to make sure that out of this 30-inch ground stake, that we get to our depth, we wanna go ahead and pre-mark 18 inches from the bottom. So if we take our measuring tape and we come up here and pre-mark 18 inches, that's the minimum depth we want to drive these to. That makes sure, again, that if we mushroom the top of these, if anything is to go afoul, that we have plenty of room to make our trims. All right, guys, we got all the ground stakes driven in here. We went ahead, a couple of them may even be deeper than 18 inches at this point, and we still have this much excess above the line. Now, we did do some damage to the top of our ground stakes, as we expected to do. So the whole point, like I said, we hung our line at 6 inches, individually marked on our 4 corners here. As we go with the lay of the land, if we're marked at 6 inches on the high side and 6 inches on the low side, now our timber is gonna have an even fall with the land, even if the land isn't evenly falling itself. So what we wanna go ahead and do is with our line, it's gonna be in the way a little bit as we get the saw here, so we're gonna go ahead and just mark right at the line. And I did it on the outside here. That way I can be right where my line is. And I'm just gonna pull the string out of my way for a moment. Go ahead and take the bandsaw here. The Sawzall works. whatever you have handy. A hacksaw if you really want to get the elbow grease into it. We'll get on our line there. All right, now I'm gonna let my line come back up. We're right there at the top. I cut exactly on the line. And we're gonna do that for all the ground stakes going all the way around the house.